Okay, hello everyone, welcome. My name's Eloisa Ramos and I'm here with my friend Connie. Hi Connie.
Hi.
And my daughter Sonia. Hi Sonia. So
Hi.
we are studying the text of A Course in Miracles. And today we are working on chapter 3, the innocent perception. And we are on section 4, which is error and the ego. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start. The abilities you now possess are only shadows of your real strength. All your present functions are divided and open to question and doubt. This is because you are not certain how you will use them and are therefore incapable of knowledge. You are also incapable of knowledge because you can still perceive lovelessly. Perception did not exist until the separation introduced degrees, aspects, and intervals. Spirit has no levels, and all conflict arises from the concept of levels. Only the levels of the Trinity are capable of unity. The levels created by the separation cannot but conflict. This is because they are meaningless to each other. Okay, we'll just take one line at a time. Okay, the abilities you now possess are only shadows of your real strength. So we are not, you could say, fully in our God-given strength. Whatever abilities we have, they're only shadows of the real strength that we have been created with or given. So all of your present functions are divided and open to question and doubt. And this is because you are not certain how you will use them and are therefore incapable of knowledge. Okay, so this is talking about purpose and intention. So when it says that that our present functions are divided and open to question and doubt, it means that we are not being guided by one cohesive guide, the Holy Spirit, which would give the same purpose, same intention to everything that we do, to all of our functions. And that's why there is so much chaos in our own day-to-day, you could say, behavior or, even what we do. We can do things that are, that can oppose, that can be opposite of each other. So, and that's because what we do comes from how and what we perceive, what we think. And because our thinking and our perception is not certain, okay, because perception, remember, is not knowledge. So perception, and we talked about in the previous section, number 3, perception versus knowledge. So we have to keep in mind that perception cannot give us certainty in terms of what knowledge is, which is certainty without any fear, without any doubt. And so everything that we do, there's always this element of, okay, well, gosh, is this really the best, the best decision, the best thing that I can do? Or there's always a little tinge of fear, because of that uncertainty there. Whereas when we're guided and we are in a place of knowing, there's no certainty at all. It's just like obvious. Of course, this is what, I should be doing. And then number 4 says that you are incapable of knowledge. because you can still perceive lovelessly. So one is, we are not capable of knowledge because we are not certain, okay, on how to use all these abilities that we have. And number two, because we still perceive lovelessly without love. So our perception is still not innocent, is not purified completely. And remember that it was talking, the previous section was talking about that innocence cannot just be partial, it has to be whole. So, so let's see, perception did not exist until the separation introduced degrees, aspects, and intervals. And that makes sense because what are aspects, intervals, and degrees? Well, they're little chunks, right, that separate things into let's see, into different pieces and different parts, and into the perception of differences, you know, like, oh, you know, I have a sweater on, but I'm still a little cold. I could put on another sweater. Okay, so that's an aspect of degrees where my state, where I think that what I am experiencing here is a matter of comfort, as a matter of degree of whether I'm cold or whether I'm warm, or, you know, that kind of thing. So let's see. And of course, I'm talking about the body, and I'm talking about the sensations that I think the body experiences, even though it doesn't really, body doesn't really do anything. It's all ego. It's all ego experience. But the spirit has no levels, and no conflict arises from the concept of levels. So the idea of levels is that, you know, when we say, well, yes, I really want to go to the movies, but a part of me just wants to stay home and read and, you know, be all warm and cozy. But another part of me really wants to see this movie. Well, we're splitting ourselves into levels, and that's why there's conflict there. And let's see, and those levels that I have made are made to separate, to distinguish the act of staying home and reading a book from the act of going out to watch a movie. So I'm making those different. And because I've made them different, I cannot unite them. So number 7, only the levels of the Trinity are capable of unity, okay? Because there's no difference. At the level of knowledge, there is no difference. So even though it talks about there being a Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, there's no real difference there because it's all spirit. So the levels created by the separation cannot but conflict. This is because they are meaningless to each other. Okay, so yeah, so anything there? You know, it's interesting, the word meaningless there, Connie. They're meaningless to each other. So it's almost as if these separate parts are actually almost separate little selves who are kind of split off from each other as if they don't know one another. Yeah.
That's interesting. And that makes me think of people who have multiple personality disorders. Yeah, they're just in different states of, yeah.
Yes, and you know, to some degree, we we all do that. It's just that
Yeah.
I think that the people that are diagnosed, the separation has become so distinct that you can
Mhm.
identify, like different personalities, etc. But if we look at our own behavior, at our
Mm.
own of what we do from day to day, or how we treat some people and then how we treat other people, you could literally say, oh my gosh, or how I behave in public and how I behave in private. That's usually a good way to see that difference, right? There's things that you would never say in public that you are very free to say in private, that kind of thing.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
We're just absolutely off our rockers.
Uh, yes, and because we're all off our rockers, it seems perfectly normal.
I guess so.
Yeah. So um
Right.
yeah. Okay. All right. So number 2.
Consciousness, the level of perception, was the first split introduced into the mind after the separation, making the mind a perceiver rather than a creator. Consciousness is correctly identified as the domain of the ego. The ego is a wrong-minded attempt to perceive yourself as you wish to be rather than as you are. Yet you can know yourself only as you are because that is all you can be sure of. Everything else is open to question.
Okay. So when we think of consciousness, what it's saying here is that that's also the level of perception, which makes sense, because if you think of yourself and you say, oh, well, yeah, I'm conscious that I'm sitting here, and I'm conscious that I'm drinking some water. Well, that self, okay, that is conscious that it's doing all these things, is perceiving itself as the subject, and then it's perceiving other things as objects. Okay, so what it's conscious of is conscious of separation, of being a separate self. And that was the first split introduced into the mind after the separation, so that the mind became a perceiver rather than a creator. So as a perceiver, I can perceive myself any way I want, which is convenient, okay, to delusion. um, and and also that that consciousness is correctly identified as the domain of the ego. So because I can perceive myself any way I want, I can believe that I am not as God created me. So I can believe anything about myself. I can believe that I am self-created. I can believe that there's no God. I can believe that I'm a body. I can believe that I'm a separate personality, ego. I can believe. So, um, so, um, so the perceiver um, is still part of the, or it's under the domain of the ego. So the ego thought system, because it's a belief in separation, is going to perceive itself to be something separate, like a body. So the ego believes and perceives us to be the body. And that's my own thinking that that's what I am. That's all. Okay. So the ego is a wrong-minded attempt to perceive yourself as you wish rather than as you are. Yeah. So this is how I can dream that I am not as God created me. And therefore, I can be a temporal body in time, and I can be vulnerable and weak, and I can die. And I can also somehow, at the same time, be so powerful that I can offend God and be a sinner. So, so the ideas don't have to uh, they don't have to make sense. They can contradict, because it's all imagination anyway. I can imagine anything I want, and that's sort of the attraction to illusion. But at the same time, it's basically chaos. And number 4 says that because you can only know yourself as you are, that's the only thing you can be sure of. That's why anything else is going to be fearful. There's going to be uncertainty. There's going to be doubt. And I'm not going to know who I am in truth, for sure. I can identify with being, for example, my gender. So I can say, yes, I'm female. I can identify with my heritage, where I grew up, what culture I come from. I can identify myself with, maybe the friends that I have, my associates, um, or my career, or anything. Okay, but that's not going to tell me. That's going to be just a tiny little piece of what I think I am. That's not knowledge. Because, yeah, so all of that is going to be open to question, like, like maybe someone will say, well, you don't act like a female, you act more like a male. Okay, even if you identify as a female, something like that, or when I grew up, I came from Mexico. I was born in Mexico, but most of my friends and their parents, they would say, oh, no, you don't look Mexican, you look like Spanish or Portuguese. Or, my teacher who said, no, you can't be Mexican. I go, okay. So that's what I'm saying, is that everything else outside of how God created us is open to question. Nobody has to believe it just because I believe it. Yeah. So anything, Connie?
Well, and that even takes us back to, the false belief which is from the ego, that we are male or female. I mean, that's a whole, we're all of it.
Yes, because it's part of the body identity.
And that's what's so interesting about what's going on now with all this gender stuff. It's, people are questioning.
Yes.
What am I? Really?
Well, yes, because everything is open to question, right? Which is okay, because ultimately, remember what we read last time in, let's see, in perception versus knowledge, the questioning mind perceives itself in time and therefore looks for future answers. And I'm reading from paragraph 3 of here. You want me to go through that, or I can just reread it?
Yeah, that's fine.
The closed mind believes the future and the present will be the same. This establishes a seemingly state that is usually an attempt to counteract underlying fear that the future will be worse. Let's see, I was looking for, here we go. It's on paragraph 2, line 6. Questioning illusions is the first step in undoing them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it's okay to question our gender, because we're not our gender. Okay, we're not the body. We're not the persona that maybe has more, more what we've come to perceive to be male qualities versus female qualities, that kind of thing. But if we get stuck, if we invest into one of those perceptions of what we think we are, then all we're doing is just investing in uncertainty about what we are. That's all. And that's not going to get us to the place of really knowing and having certainty. Yeah. So, but anyway, okay, number 3.
The ego is, here we go, the questioning aspect of the post-separation self, which was made rather than created. It is capable of asking questions, but not of perceiving meaningful answers, because these would involve knowledge and cannot be perceived. The mind is therefore confused, because only one-mindedness can be without confusion. A separated or divided mind must be confused. It is necessarily uncertain about what it is. It is necessarily uncertain about what it is. It has to be in conflict because it is out of accord with itself. This makes its aspects strangers to each other, and this is the essence of the fear-prone condition in which attack is always possible. You have every reason to feel afraid as you perceive yourself. This is why you cannot escape from fear until you realize that you did not and could not create yourself. You can never make your misperceptions true, and your creation is beyond your own error. That is why you must eventually choose to heal the separation.
Yeah, that's a really good paragraph.
Yeah.
Anything there, Connie?
No, there's a lot there. I mean,
There's a
yeah,
lot.
it's great. I'll let you have at it.
Okay, so okay, so this is interesting because it says that the ego is a questioning aspect of the post-separation self, which was made rather than created. Okay, and so in essence, you know, what I just read previously, that that questioning illusion is the first step is undoing it. That's kind of the highest thing that the ego can do in terms of questioning illusion. Okay, because it's actually questioning itself. Okay, and and once we do that, once we actually question ourselves, like, who am I really? I mean, I'm not this, I'm not really this, I'm not really this. Once we do that, we are opening the mind to receiving meaningful answers, which are not going to come from the ego, the the post-separated self. It's going to come from the Holy Spirit, the higher mind, the self that is still connected to knowledge and knows that it's not a separate self, but one self. And so the ego is capable of asking the questions, but it's not going to be able to give itself meaningful answers. So all the answers that come from the ego are going to be meaningless because they're not going to truly answer the question. It's just going to keep us stuck in the ego questioning self that doesn't know knowledge. Yeah. So meaningful answers involve knowledge and cannot be perceived with the conscious mind. That's the domain of the ego. So the mind is therefore confused because only one-mindedness can be without confusion. So, and one-mindedness is the is true perception. It's Holy Spirit perception, because it has accepted the atonement. It has recognized that there's only one creation that God created, and that's what we are as one son. And so without that recognition, we're going to be perceiving ourselves as different bits and pieces and therefore uncertain about what we are. So, and number 6, it has to be in conflict because it is out of accord with itself. So the false mind, which is the which is the ego thought system, is in conflict and is out of accord with itself. And that's why it's fearful. Different aspects of itself are strangers to each other. So a lot of what we believe we are is unconscious, and um, and and therefore, you know, I can muscle test unconscious stuff, and that my conscious mind would be totally unaware of. So so a lot of times, if I work with people, I don't introduce muscle testing in there. They have to be really open, and they have to already recognize that there's a lot of aspects that we've hidden from ourselves and are strangers to ourselves, and are open to taking responsibility for what's in the unconscious mind. Because otherwise they'll just deny. They'll say, well, no, I'm not conscious of that. That's not true. So I cannot be helpful. If they have not already recognized that the unconscious mind is still our mind, and we are still responsible for it, even if we're not aware of all the stuff that's driving, you know, us to do unconscious things. We're still responsible for doing those things, and thinking those things and saying those things and all of that. But it does become a very fear-prone condition, because the split is such that it's as if there was this whole part of us that is unknown, and it's very scary to go into that unknown. And we're going to project that. So we're also going to be afraid of people that we don't know, that we perceive as strangers, because we're afraid of the unknown, of what we've buried, what we've hidden, you know, those different aspects that we've rejected from ourselves, become strangers to us. And therefore they become a threat. We think that they can attack us, or what we think we are, because of course, bringing in all of those other beliefs would challenge our own thinking, you know. So we have to be open to letting go of what we think. And that's why the questioning aspect of it is the first step in undoing the ego thought system, because we have to be comfortable with being wrong about what we think about ourselves, and not make it, you know, traumatic or personal, or not judge ourselves for it. Yes, so you have every reason to feel afraid as you perceive yourself. This is why you cannot escape from fear until you realize that you did not and could not create yourself. Okay, so that's a really important and key idea to be clear and not have any reservations about. Okay, because ultimately this idea right here is going to be the our saving grace, you could call it. You know, because I don't have to believe everything I think I am, okay? Because I did not create myself. Okay, if I believe that I created myself, I am going to be very invested in believing my own thoughts about myself. And, you know, while it's wonderful to fantasize, okay, there's still misperceptions. And while I can believe them to be true, they're not really true in reality. Um, and this next part here is reassuring, because it says your creation is beyond your own error. So irregardless of the error in our own thinking, we cannot change the truth of how we were created, even though the belief in sin would have us say that we can. Okay. So in fact, the belief in sin says that we have already changed the way we were created. And if we start from that premise, we're going to go around in circles until we come back to that and release that. And then ultimately it says that is why you must eventually choose to heal the separation. Okay, because in the long run, we can do this for as long as we want. Okay, but eventually there's no way out of the separation. It's like a labyrinth and you just stay stuck in there until we choose to heal it. And at some point, we're going to do that because it's not sustainable, because it's fearful. And we can only take so much fear and so much chaos, Yeah. Okay. So anything there?
Actually, I just had a question. In sentence 2 of paragraph 3, when you're talking about when it says it is capable of asking questions but not perceiving meaningful answers because these would involve knowledge and cannot be perceived. What I got from that is that the meaning of the seek and do not find for the ego?
Yes. So if it tries to, so if the ego as us asks the question, and then we try to answer the question ourselves, we try to find the solution ourselves as the ego, then we're just going to be seeking and not finding.
Yep.
Yes. And all it means is that the questions themselves are not seeking for truth. So we have to get to the point where we say, oh my God, I don't know the answer. Okay, so if I'm asking the question and then I go and answer my own question, why would I ask the question to begin with? I must have the answer. Okay, so it's like pointless. Okay, so we engage, the ego thinking is completely pointless, but it's very distracting, and it definitely keeps us going in these I think the course uses the word useless journeys, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's what it just made me think of. Yeah. Hey, thanks. That clarifies it.
Yeah. Okay, so number 4, right-mindedness is not to be confused with the knowing mind, okay, because it is applicable only to right perception. You can be right-minded or wrong-minded, and even this is subject to degrees, clearly demonstrating that knowledge is not involved. The term right-mindedness is properly used as the correction for wrong-mindedness and applies to the state of mind that induces accurate perception. It is miracle-minded because it heals perception, and this is indeed a miracle in view of how you perceive yourself.
I'm sorry, it says it misperception. I think you said
oh, I misread that.
Accurate perception. Maybe just read that line again if you wouldn't mind.
What's the number? What's the number?
3.
Number 3. The term right-mindedness is properly used as the correction for wrong-mindedness and applies to the state of mind that induces accurate perception. It is a miracle. It is miracle-minded because it heals misperception. And this is indeed a miracle in view of how you perceive yourself. Yes, so misperception comes from wrong-mindedness. Because it is taking guidance from the ego thought system. And so true perception would be from the corrected wrong-mindedness, which is the right-mindedness, which is the Holy Spirit. Because remember, the Holy Spirit is the answer to the belief in separation. And the Holy Spirit is the answer that says, it didn't happen. That's not true. We're still just one self. Okay. And that's the miracle. That's the change in perception from perceiving and believing that we are separate to recognizing, okay, remembering again that we are one self, which is true perception. But true perception, again, is still part of consciousness. It's not the knowing mind. But true perception, which is guided by the Holy Spirit, is linked to the knowing mind, because it remembers love. That's the present memory. So with true perception, we can remember love, and therefore we can offer forgiveness rather than hold on to the grievance. And that's what the miracle is. It's a miracle. It's miracle minded because it heals the misperception of separation through forgiveness, because it recognizes that nothing that happens here, nothing that you do, nothing that happens is without my consent. Because my mind is the only level that is causal. The mind it's one mind, but I can say my mind, when I take responsibility for it, is the only causal level. And so I have no reason to project guilt, and no reason to believe there is guilt, because everything that happened is with my consent. So I'm receiving what I'm asking for. Why would there be any guilt? There's no wrongdoing at all. And so I use everything as an opportunity for healing, for learning the lessons that I'm here to learn. Okay. And that itself is what gives cohesion and purpose to everything that I do. Because remember at the beginning how we said, let me see, back at paragraph 1, it was talking about how let's see, because let's see, maybe it was in paragraph 2. It was talking about how they are all without a single purpose here. Yeah, line 2 there, paragraph 1. All your present functions are divided and open to question and doubt. So this is because you're not certain how you will use them and are therefore incapable of knowledge. Okay, so the right mind knows how it's going to use all of its abilities. It's going to use them for healing the mind as opportunities for forgiveness. And that's the only purpose that anything in this world has. And that will give everything that we do the meaning. It will give it cohesive meaning, so that it will take us out of the fear and the uncertainty, because there's alignment now between all the different parts and levels and all of that. Let's see. So the right mind is miracle minded because it heals misperception. And this is indeed a miracle in view of how you perceive yourself, which is conflicted different parts, discombobulated, confused, all of that. Okay. Number 5. Is it Sonia?
I forgot.
Yeah, I think I just read number 4.
Oh, okay. Perception always involves some misuse of mind because it brings the mind into areas of uncertainty. The mind is very active. When it chooses to be separated, it chooses to perceive. Until then, it wills only to know. Afterwards, it can only choose ambiguously, and the only way out of ambiguity is clear perception. The mind returns to its proper function only when it wills to know. This places it in the service of spirit, where perception is changed. The mind chooses to divide itself when it chooses to make its own levels, but it could not entirely separate itself from spirit because it is from spirit that it derives its whole power to make or create. Even in miscreation, the mind is affirming its source, or it would merely cease to be. This is impossible because the mind belongs to spirit, which God created and which is therefore eternal.
Mhm. Okay. Anything, Sonia?
Um, I just would like some clarity on the wills only to know,
Mhm.
because it uses that a few times.
Okay. Okay, so perception involves some misuse of mind because it brings the mind into areas of uncertainty. So when we perceive, we are going back to the body senses, and we are going back to what we have learned in the past to make sense of something that we are, looking at or experiencing, right? So, if I take a drink of something, um, and I'm going to use that my sense of taste to try to know what it is. No, okay, because when I look at it, I could say, oh, it's clear, so it could be water, but maybe it has something in it. Maybe there's flavoring in it, and I can't see it. Okay, so right off the bat, it's unclear to me just by looking at it that it is water. I'm guessing it's water, so I taste it, and then I depend on my taste buds and all the recorded database in my past to like, well, that reminds me, it tastes a little bit like strawberry, but it could be a little bit like raspberry, so there's always that tiny bit of uncertainty, or I'm like, oh no, this definitely has a very strong taste of a blueberry. Okay, it's got to be blueberry. Okay, well, if it's an artificial sweetener, it's not even blueberry. Who knows what it is? It's a bunch of chemicals, right? So 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 we're misusing the mind because there's no certainty there. um, and and um, and when it chooses to be separate, when it chooses to be identified with consciousness, which is the perceiver, which is the one that senses, that feels, that thinks, it knows what this world is, what these things are. When it chooses to do that, it's choosing to believe that it is separate. Um, and 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 as long as we are identified with that consciousness that thinks it knows what the world is and what's happening and what this experience means and all of that, um, until I let go of that identification, um, I cannot will to know, because I've already decided. I've already traded knowledge for perception. Okay, so so be so Until then, it wills only to know. So, okay, so before I choose to be separate, before I choose to perceive separation, before I choose the first separation, which was consciousness, before that, my will was only to know. Okay. Okay. So without my identifying with consciousness and believing that everything I've taught myself in the past, everything that I believe that's true about the world is true. Okay. Without that, what is left is only the will to know, because once we recognize that perception is not absolute truth, there's always going to be some level of uncertainty, even if it's just a tiny bit. Okay. And therefore we recognize there's always room for error. Okay. There's always going to be fear of being wrong. There's always going to be fear that I'm going to make a mistake. There's always going to be fear that, oh man, I just took a swing of, isopropyl alcohol because it looked like water. Okay. And I spit it out, because that's what I do when I identify with my perception. I make really stupid mistakes, and then I feel really embarrassed and ashamed. Okay. Because it's like, how could I have done that? I should have known. Well, I should have known, but obviously I didn't. So I keep telling myself, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know, because I make error after error after error. And then rather than saying, oh, that is really true, I don't know anything, I beat myself up. And then I just say, well, I'm just, I've never been good enough. I've never been smart enough. I'm always going to be mistakes. I'm always going to be a loser, and so then I'm just making up more errors about what I am. And then I establish all these self-identities that are just a bunch of made up illusions and judgments that are not true. And instead of undoing the error, I'm adding error to error to error. Okay. Which is all misperception. And so the mind returns to its proper function only when it wills to know. So at some point, I say, oh my gosh, there's got to be another way. I am not getting to closer to knowing what I am this way. And once I realize that perception is not absolute truth and it's never going to get me to absolute truth, then I am really inclined to just want to know the truth and to do the inner journey of going into what I've buried in there, because all of that has to be looked at to know that it's not true and to be released. And the more we do that, the closer we get to the place where you say, okay, well, I'm not this, I'm not that. I'm not this, I'm not that. And you go through everything. I'm not any of that. So once you clear everything, then you come to a place of knowing, not because you have a concept of what you are, but because there are no concepts and you're beyond the conceptual thinking, perceptual, conscious mind. I don't know if that made any sense, but yeah. So it's a process of undoing that is the will to know. So if we are really invested in healing the mind, it's a process of undoing everything that we thought we were, which is not true. Um, I remember reading when I was doing the training in EFT that the way that it was described there is, think of a dirty floor, okay? And when you start cleaning it, you're not aware that underneath it is this beautiful hardwood until you do the work of cleaning the layer by layer by layer. And that's kind of how, we get to a sense of our true nature, which is loving and whole and created by a loving and whole source in its likeness. And that's how we come to know the truth about what we are, and also the truth about what God is, because God cannot be different from what God creates. Okay, so anything, Sonia, there?
Well, that was a really good explanation. I follow everything. It's just, I guess my real question was, I don't really know how it's, because it seemed like you were using will interchangeably with wanting. I
Oh,
need you
okay.
to define wills, because that's the
Oh,
word that's
okay.
tripping me up. I understand everything else,
Okay.
but the wills, I don't understand.
Okay. All right. So wanting comes from a place of lack. So wanting comes from the wrong mind. It's part of the ego thought system. So wanting says, that you start with the belief that there's something missing, and that's why I want that. And even if I think, well, I have everything, I'm still not satisfied. So I want more. Okay. So there's still dissatisfaction. So want is always coming from a place of feeling like there's not enough, like there could be more, like so it's a sense of not being complete or whole, the wanting. Okay. All right. So the will comes from realizing, from coming to understand that perception, okay, is always subject to error, to uncertainty. Okay. And because remember that the first level of separation was consciousness, which is perception. So anytime that there is any kind of fear, any kind of lack, anything that is not whole, complete, that does not give you certainty, as would knowledge, okay, we're going to be at the level of perception, and we're not going to be in the right mind if we are wanting. We're going to be in the wrong mind, because the right mind recognizes it's oneself and that it fundamentally is created without lack, without wants. Okay, so once we get into a place of wanting, we are in the wrong mind, the false mind, the ego thought system that says I am separate and I am not whole. Okay, and so when we are in the false mind, wanting is the substitute for will. It's called wishful thinking. It's not true will. Okay, and that's why we go into imagination as oh man, I I'm into video games, and but they just came out with a new console, and darn it, it's $400, and man, I don't have $400, but I really want that. I really wish I could have that, and because that's my passion. Okay, so I'm in a place of lack, I'm in a place of wanting, I'm in a place of wishing, and that self that is in that position is powerless to give itself what it wants. Okay, because it's lacking $450. Okay, so that self that wants and wishes is a self that I believe I am as not being whole and complete as God created me. Okay, so I cannot exercise my will. That's called imprisoned will. I have imprisoned my will by all these ideas of what I think that I am. And so I cannot exercise this will to know. So that's why we stay so stuck, and we need the help of someone else, or we need to have some sense of, okay, this is intolerable. I feel so stuck here, so suffocated, so powerless, that I'm asking, I have to go to a higher place. I have to remember that there's a higher mind that can help me, that there's Holy Spirit that can help me. I don't know if that helps, Sonia.
I think this is something that I need to review by myself, because I think we're going to spend too much time, because I'm still not understanding what will is. Because I know the wanting and everything is clear, but
Okay.
It's going to take too much time. So my answer might be
Okay,
if we keep reading.
Okay, let me just give you one other thing. You can think of will in terms of intention, the power of intention. Okay, not attention, but the power of intention as a creative power. Okay, that is the decision-making mind. Okay, because that establishes that the decision-making mind is causal and the only level of cause. Okay, so will, to exercise my will, is to take back my power and to recognize that I am the cause of everything. So if I say, oh, I can't have that console, I'm not going to say, oh, I'm such a victim, whatever, my parents came from the wrong, background, maybe I didn't go to college. I'm not going to rationalize what I think of myself to be true as powerless to give myself this thing that I want. Okay, I would recognize that for some reason I am choosing to experience powerlessness in this situation. Okay, so I am recognizing that my will is to experience lack and powerlessness. And okay, so the will, right here, even in miscreation, the mind is affirming its source. Okay, so even when we miscreate lack, not being able to quote thinking that I am not getting what I want. Okay, I am still affirming that same source, because I would not be able to have this experience that's a miscreation of being powerless without my own creative power, which is will, to have it be that way. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's starting to a little bit, but we can just move on, because
okay.
this is going to take a long time for me to, yeah.
Yes, because it's a difference between creating and making. Okay, we make illusion, but we create with the will of God. Okay.
Well,
And
that's what I was going to say. It's the will of God, really, and not the will of the ego.
yes, because the ego is a made up thing. It's not really will, it's wishful thinking.
Mhm.
Okay. But the will of God is our will, is our true will. And we share in that power of creation. And so that's what we are in essence. That's why it says here that even in miscreation, the mind is affirming its source, or it would merely cease to be.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so because spirit is will. You can think of that, Sonia. Think of spirit as will. Okay, because it is from spirit that it derives its whole power to make or create.
Spirit.
Mhm. So the mind, when it chooses to divide itself, it chooses to make its own levels. Okay. What it does is it loses the sense of oneness. And when it does that, it fragments its own sense of power. Or you can think of it in terms of energy if you want to. But will is not the same thing as energy. Okay. But it could not entirely separate itself from spirit. So spirit is source, creative source. And another word for it is will, because it is from this spirit, from spirit, that it derives its whole power to make or create. So the mind derives its creative power from spirit. What it does with that creative power is either create in the likeness of God or miscreate, which is illusion. So it's misusing that creative power. It's misusing that will to make something that is not like what we are. And that's why it's not real, it's illusion. But we can go on here with number 6.
But one
Yeah.
thing I was just came to mind is my husband. The other night he said, and he periodically brings this up. He says, I'd still like to get some other artwork in here, and so the difference between like just wanting, I mean, it seems the same thing to me. I don't get attached to that. I go, oh, okay. And but there seems to be, yeah, I think maybe there must be a sense of lack there, or he just would really like a few more things to look at and be with in our house. So I'm just with that word want.
Okay. Well, sometimes the wanting can be like a longing. Okay.
Mhm.
So and underneath that is kind of a recognition that there's something
Something's
that
missing.
is not coming through that I would like to come through. And art can be a means of having that spiritual connection come through.
Hmm.
So sometimes the wanting can be more of a sense of longing, like it's a little bit of a recognition that, there's something missing that
Mhm.
I have, that I that I it's almost like it's like that I've forgotten, but not quite forgotten, because I wouldn't be
Mhm.
longing for it if I
Mhm.
had completely forgotten it. So it's a tiny bit of that memory, of the present memory of love. So we're
Mhm.
trying to connect.
Mhm.
Um, we're trying to connect to that present
Mhm.
memory of love, but we're not quite recognizing that it cannot be found in the world. So we're kind of looking for channels in the world to be able to connect to that, which is fine. Okay. But at some point, we recognize that the connection is inside our mind. And there's things in the world that can remind us, that can trigger that memory for us, but it's not outside. It's not separate from us.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's an interesting perspective on that it is, yeah, wanting to connect
To something
through
higher.
artwork, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, well, what do you think of that one, Sonia?
That I can definitely
Well, you're the artist here.
relate to. Yeah. Yeah. Because there's pieces, and even
Mm.
in different art forms, like some people connect to music and some people connect to dancing, you know. But for me, there's been certain pieces where there's just you can feel, you can connect to that like essence beyond the painting or whatever it is you're looking at, and it just kind of communicates. Art is really for the purpose of communication in my perspective. So I think that sometimes that maybe wanting is from kind of wanting that connection. I
Yeah.
think it's just kind of, yeah.
Mm-hmm. In wanting that connection is wanting clear perception. See up here in line 5, the only way out of ambiguity is clear perception.
But
So
then again, we give everything its meaning. So yeah, okay, a piece of artwork here.
yes, but there's a part of the mind that still remembers love, even though
Yes.
we're afraid of it and we've buried it.
Hmm.
So there's pieces that show up for us in our life that can
Okay. Yeah.
kind of trigger that memory.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
Mhm.
That makes sense. A lot more sense to me now. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah. It triggers that old memory. What did you call it?
Well, it's actually a present memory. It's just that
Yeah.
it seems like it's an old memory because we've sort of put a veil in front of it with all the past stuff.
The forgotten song.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's cool. That's a big deal. Thank you.
Yes,
Mhm.
and so the forgotten song is what calls us,
Mhm.
which and that which calls us is actually our true will. Okay,
Mm. Mm.
because the true will remembers love, and so that's what we are. We are love. Um, and see, number 6, the mind returns to its proper function only when it wills to know. And what does it will to know? Well, it wills to know itself as love. Okay.
Mm.
That helps. I think in terms of art, I'm able to kind of connect to what you're saying, Mom. I think that's really helpful. Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that more now. Thank.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank.
Well, and I understand Chris's wanting a
Yeah.
little bit more. I mean, but also it could come from just a place of lack, feeling something to fill something up. Well, filling up that spiritual hole.
So yes, so you can see that they're just two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And that's basically what it's saying right here, Connie, that even in miscreation, the mind is affirming its source. So even in lack and wanting, the mind is still affirming its source, or it would merely cease to be, because we are love. So even when we miscreate and we believe we're not love, we believe we are a loser, or whatever we think we are. It's terrible, whatever. So even when we miscreate that, um, the power that we use to miscreate that is coming from source. The creative power to miscreate is still coming from source.
What?
Yes,
No.
miscreation still requires power. The mind. Okay.
Yeah,
So the
but
mind is
miscreation,
powerful. The mind is powerful. It's going to create or it's going to miscreate. Either way, the power of the mind only comes from one source. What it decides to do with that power, we call either miscreation or creation. It's either in alignment with truth,
Mhm.
or it's going to be not in alignment with truth.
But isn't that when it has split off from God into separation? That's when it
Yes, it has
misbehaves.
split off, but it did not say it cut itself off. It said it
Right.
split off. That's
Oh,
not the same as cutting itself off.
I did not understand that.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so, I've been asleep, sorry. No, I didn't realize that in miscreation, we are still coming from God. The mind,
power,
the power,
the power that the mind uses to miscreate is still coming from the same, because there's only one source of power.
right.
There's only one source of creative power. It's God. That's what we use the word God for. Source of all life, all creation. Yeah.
Boy, talk about misperception. I really read that completely wrong. Yeah, I was thinking that, yeah, it's coming from the ego source. Otherwise, the miscreation wouldn't be there.
Yes,
Wow.
but the ego, yes, and the ego source is a making. We made that as a miscreation.
Mm-hmm.
And that miscreation was still coming, that power to miscreate was still coming from source.
I did not realize that. Did
Yeah.
you know that, Sonia? I feel like
I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, because otherwise, Connie, otherwise, it's very easy then to believe that there is a good creator and then there's an evil creator that miscreates. Do you see what I'm saying?
well, the ego is kind of the
But
evil doer.
okay, but it's not real. It's a
Right.
miscreation. It's not real.
Yeah.
It cannot oppose God. It's a belief that says it's a belief in sin. That's what the belief in sin is. It says that the miscreations, that what we do, the error opposes God, the will of God. Okay, that's not true. God is not at all even affected. The truth, the level of absolute truth, God, knowledge, cannot be affected by miscreation because it's unreality.
Yeah, I get that. I just, yeah, did not
Yeah.
realize that the source, the power came from God. It's still from God, the power to miscreate.
Well, yeah,
So
because
that doesn't,
otherwise, where would it come from? If it would come from ego, then you'd saying there's two sources and there would be separation there.
well, yeah, that's what it feels like. There are, yeah, that we're in
Okay.
conflict all the time with that.
Well, yeah, that's the whole basis of duality. That's
Yeah.
duality in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
But remember that knowledge is non-dualistic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that means that duality is illusion.
Mm-hmm.
So the feeling that you're referring to is also illusion. It's
Mm.
witnessing to something that
Yeah.
is not truth.
Okay, got it. It just made sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry.
It's okay. Yeah.
Ooh.
Okay.
My turn.
Yep.
The ability to perceive made the body possible because you must perceive something and with something. That is why perception involves an exchange or translation, which knowledge does not need. The interpretive function of perception, a distorted form of creation, then permits you to interpret the body as yourself in an attempt to escape from the conflict you have induced. Spirit, which knows, could not be reconciled with this loss of power because it is incapable of darkness. This makes spirit almost inaccessible to the mind and entirely inaccessible to the body. Thereafter, spirit is perceived as a threat because light abolishes darkness merely by showing you it is not there. Truth will always overcome error in this way. This cannot be an active process of correction because, as I have already emphasized, knowledge does not do anything. It can be perceived as an attacker, but it cannot attack. What you perceive as its attack is your own vague recognition that knowledge can always be remembered, never having been destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Okay, the ability to perceive made the body possible because you must perceive something and with something. So consciousness, the perceiver, okay, is what makes the body possible. Okay, because the body is a projection of the perceiving mind, the conscious thinking mind. Okay, because how are we going to perceive if there's nothing out there to perceive? So we have to project objects out into the world to perceive. And the body is part of the physical world. It's also a projection of the perceiving mind. Okay, and that's why perception involves an exchange or a translation, which knowledge does not need. So what we do is we put the body out, okay, as an object, but then we say, oh, but it's myself, and I use that to perceive it myself. So I use the body to perceive myself as the body, as an object. Because my body senses, see, look, I can touch my body, okay? Okay, so I can, I can smell my body. I can taste my body. So I know my body is there. Why? Because I can taste it and touch it and feel it. Okay, well, it's a loop, right? Okay, so I am perceiving with the same object that I have projected to perceive. Okay. And so there's an exchange because now I have to interpret because there's a separation now. Once I project a body and I can perceive it, then there's two. There's the object and there's the subject. And the object is going to have the meaning that I give it, that it has for me. I see only the past. That's what I see in the body. That's what I see when I look at, my cup. That's what I see when I look at the table. And so, and that part, that gap, which is the interpretive function of perception, this is where we distort what is there, and we do not see it as it is now. And those are some of the early lessons. Okay, that's why I cannot see what is there now, is because of this interpretive function of perception. I give it the interpretation of my past, and therefore that's what I'm going to see, not because it's really there, but because that's what I gave it. That's what I projected onto it. And so, okay, and because this is all separation, there's all this conflict, we interpret the body as ourselves to try to escape from that conflict. And so we try to say, well, the body also interprets, because the brain is the interpreter and the brain is part of the body. So we're making the body both the object and the interpreter, and the subject of perception. We're making it all three parts. The me, myself, and I. So, okay, so the spirit which knows could not be reconciled with this loss of power because it is incapable of darkness. So to interpret is to not know. Okay, if we knew what this was now, I would not have to project meaning onto it because I would already know. And 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 knowledge is power. Okay, so for spirit, doing this thing that we're doing here with perception is a loss of power. And that all of that is projection, that is like this veil of darkness into seeing what is really there now, which is just love, light. Okay, and that's why it says that spirit is incapable of darkness, and that's why spirit sees only innocence. Spiritual vision sees only innocence. It cannot see evil. It cannot see darkness. Um, and and therefore, this makes spirit almost, not completely, inaccessible to the mind and entirely inaccessible to the body. Okay, so so the body and spirit cannot connect at all. Now, a lot of times we think that the body is the temple of the spirit and the spirit resides in the body. But what it says here is that that can't be true, because the body and is not, the spirit is not accessible at all to the body. So thereafter, spirit is perceived as threat. Because light abolishes darkness. So once we get used to these ideas, we're holding on to darkness. We're holding on to that veil. And if we believe that that's what is true, we're going to protect it. And therefore, we're going to perceive the light of truth that dispels the darkness, the illusion. We're going to perceive that as a threat, as a loss to what we think we are. But truth will always overcome error in this way. And what it does is it's an undoing. Okay, it's not an active process of correction. So that's what the Holy Spirit does. The Holy Spirit is like the light of truth that shines on the error, on the darkness, and it's gone, because the mind recognizes that it wasn't true. And that's why knowledge does not do anything. It just brings recognition. It brings awareness of what is true, and all the rest of it vanishes. And that's why it's called illusion, because that's what happens with illusions. They just poof. Yeah. So, okay. Number 7. Is it whose turn? Is it my turn? Yeah. God and his creations remain in surety, and therefore know that no miscreation exists. Truth cannot deal with errors that you want. I was a man who remembered spirit and its knowledge. As a man, I did not attempt to counteract error with knowledge, but to correct error from the bottom up. I demonstrated both the powerlessness of the body and the power of the mind. By uniting my will with that of my Creator, I naturally remembered spirit and its real purpose. I cannot unite your will with God's for you, but I can erase all misperceptions from your mind if you will bring it under my guidance. Only your misperceptions stand in your way. Without them, your choice is certain. Sane perception induces sane choosing. I cannot choose for you, but I can help you make your own right choice. quote, many are called, but few are quote, chosen, unquote, should be, quote, all are called, but few choose to listen, unquote. Therefore, they do not choose right. The quote unquote chosen ones are merely those who choose right sooner. Right minds can do this now, and they will find rest unto their souls. God knows you only in peace, and this is your reality. Okay, so that's beautiful. God knows you only in peace, and that means without conflict. So that means in our right mind, where we recognize we are one, there is no conflict, and we recognize that is our true reality. And that would be our right mind that finds rest unto its soul. So let's see. So we kind of already touched on most of this. Is there any questions with this one? Oh, so at the beginning, it's really talking about Jesus. Did you notice that? Yeah.
Well, in line 5, I demonstrated both the powerlessness of the body and the power of the mind.
Yes.
And the next line too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it talks about I was a man, see in line 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, who remembered spirit and its knowledge. Okay.
Oh,
And so you could say that here is a mind that awoke, right? Awoke from the dream of illusion. But remember that it's one mind.
so why didn't we wake up too?
We did. We did wake up. We did wake up. Okay. But see down here on this line where it says, let's see that. Okay. 7, I cannot unite your will with God's for you, but I can erase all misperceptions from your mind if you will bring it under my guidance. Let's see, where did it say something? Oh, I cannot choose for you, but I can help you make your own right choice.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not that the mind has woken up. Okay, it's already accomplished. Remember that what the Course says, this is all over and done with. However, if we still, here it is, number 2, truth cannot deal with errors that you want. Okay, so as long as we want the error, even though it's been given answer, it's been healed, as long as we want that error, we're going to believe we are still here as a separate self in a world of separation. Yeah, yeah. So we're not really here. We just think we are because it's a dream. Okay, because we still want that error.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. So until we let go of that, and we will only to know, we still have to learn the lessons to undo all of the miscreations that we've made that are in the way of knowing that we are a mind awake.
Boy.
Because look at number 14. The chosen ones are merely those who choose right sooner. It's talking about time. Okay, so right minds can leave time now. That's what now is, no time. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Yep, that's it for this section. So yeah, it's a you know, it's in the beginning, but obviously it's pretty, I think the reason why it's in the beginning is because it says that the first few chapters are really fundamental, so that it kind of gives you the whole thing. And then it just helps you to kind of integrate it more as you go along, and you study the rest of it. But it does kind of give you the whole thing in the, the first few chapters there. Yeah. So
But we just keep forgetting. On purpose.
yeah, and so that's okay, because remember that the mind is the one that decides the time. Yes. So there you are making a decision, and the more we realize and recognize it's our decision, the more we choose right sooner. Yeah. So we have to always remind ourselves that we are the decision-making mind. Yeah. Because if we're not the decision-making mind, how are we going to decide?
Good point.
Yeah. So that's,
that's the problem. We don't do that.
Exactly. Yeah, we're not taking that responsibility, and we have to fully accept that responsibility to say, okay, I am the decision-making mind. So, now is a good time as any to let all this illusion go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we still recording?
Yeah, let me go ahead and stop here. So thank you everyone for joining. Until next time. Bye.